We relocated him.
Call to order a work session of Goodyear City Council on April 2007. 6 members of the council are here with us today. One has bronchitis. Councilmember Holland will miss this and the council meeting. We have one item on our work session agenda, and again, as everyone knows, no action can or will be taken on this particular item. However, we will receive a presentation from the City of Phoenix Aviation Department on the Airport Master Plan. And I'd like to introduce Carl Newman. And Carl, if you take it from here. And welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, as Mayor indicated, I'm Carl Newman, Assistant Aviation Director for Operations with the City of Phoenix Aviation Department. And we're very pleased and happy to be here with you all this afternoon to present to you on this item. And again, thank you for allowing us a little bit of time here to update you on the progress of the Goodyear Airport Master Plan. As you know, we've been working on this master plan for about 2 years now, and I'm happy to report that we're just about done. We're in the final throes of getting this thing done. I'd first like to begin by thanking Councilman Antoniak, as well as Brian Dawkey and Gary Gelser, all of whom were on the Planning Advisory Committee for the master planning process. I have with me today Jane Morris, who's our Deputy Aviation Director for Planning and Environmental, Barney Helmick, our Airport Manager at Goodyear Airport, Karen Apple, Project Manager for the master planning process, and Jim Harris and Steve Benson from Kaufman Associates. Kaufman Associates are the folks who undertook the master planning process on behalf of the City of Phoenix and Goodyear. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Harris and to Barney Helmick as they will present on this item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, we're very pleased to be here this evening. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation and a couple other graphics here to go over with you and to outline the master planning process and the really an overview of the whole process, as well as the recommendations as they stand today. I believe all of you have a handout in front of you which has the PowerPoint presentation, so I'm sure you can follow along easily with that. The things that I'd like to cover today, first of all, we'll just kind of begin with the overall planning process. And again, I won't dwell too much on this. As Carl had mentioned, this process has been ongoing for the last 24 months. And again, we would like to thank the City of Goodyear and the folks that have served on the committee. It's been very helpful and provided tremendous amounts of input to the product that's before you today. I think it's been a good blend of cooperation between the City of Phoenix and City of Goodyear and represents a very well thought out plan. The process, as I said, has taken place over the last 2 years. It started at the same time the Phoenix Deer Valley Airport Master Plan started, so they did go in concert together. That's why you see the two listed here. Walking through the process, I think the most important parts of this are not only the technical aspects that were covered on a step-by-step basis through this process and then presented to the Planning Advisory Committee, which you see listed to the left, the different committee meetings, but they were held at stages during the study process, so everyone did have an opportunity to comment and provide input to this process. There were also public workshops that were held, and as you can see to the right, they list the dates for all of those. The first ones, both the PAC and the public workshop, started in April of '05, and of course for Goodyear, the latest one concluded in March of '07, so just last month. The other thing about the process was undertaken was to make sure there's a tremendous amount of public outreach, and so not only were the public workshops held, but also we created a website for the study process as it was ongoing and took comments on the website. So the public had quite a bit of opportunity to attend, and again, we had very good turnout at the public workshops that were held out in the community. Again, there were 4 of those over the course of the 2 years, and again, we're very pleased with the turnout. I know there was quite a bit of advertising that took place to get folks to come out and see what was being done. Just kind of stepping back a little bit, I'm probably going to be telling you a lot of what you already know, but just for the benefit of the audience as well. This is just a graphic which illustrates the airport as it stood at the beginning of the study and as it is today. I believe the airport sits on just slightly over 780 acres of property, and you'll see that most of it here is illustrated through a color coding to talk about how it's under use as of today. And I'm not sure if I'm well versed in the art of the pointer here, but I think what I'll do is just relate to the fact that a great deal of the property where I'm going up to now in the pink area is all undeveloped, and certainly in the blue area is the area where a lot of the large aircraft storage had been, and of course that's dwindling as we speak. Quite a few aircraft are gone, and that property is also available for development. So quite frankly, the areas in yellow, the areas in green, and some of the other areas were all very well developed, and certainly the other areas are ones that we had to work with. And of course we had the airport environment, the runway taxiway system, which took up quite a bit of property. But it kind of gave us the backdrop for the study effort. To begin with, one of the things that we felt was very important is to start off with a set of airport development objectives, and these were formulated through the beginning of the process and certainly coordinated with the Planning Advisory Committee, so everyone pretty much knew what the directives were and what we're really trying to achieve through the master planning process, and I'll just take you through these briefly. The first, of course, was to preserve and protect the public and private investment that's already been made out at the airport. Quite a bit of money has been spent, a lot of facilities developed, wanted to preserve those to the greatest degree possible. To develop a safe, attractive, and efficient aviation facility in accordance with applicable federal, state, and local regulations. As I'm sure you know, FAA and ADOT Aeronautics have a great deal of guidelines that are published relative to airports for safety and design standards. We want to make sure all of those were met. To develop a balanced facility that is responsive to current and long-term needs of general aviation. Goodyear is a general aviation reliever airport, and certainly we wanted to continue that role of the airport for the city of Goodyear and the city of Phoenix. And by virtue of that, we wanted to make sure that we responded to all general aviation needs out at the airport. And general aviation basically encompasses all forms of aircraft flight with the exception of the commercial airlines and the military. So we're really focusing in on anything from small privately owned aircraft all the way up through corporate aircraft of the larger variety. We also want to be reflective and supportive of both the City of Goodyear's and the City of Phoenix's goals, needs, and plans. By virtue of that, we work very closely with the city staff in making sure that the airport took all of those into consideration. And of course, we wanted to make sure that any future development that is proposed would not negatively impact Luke Air Force Base's mission. Luke was an active member of the Planning Advisory Committee. I think they attended every single meeting and were very helpful in their comments to us as we went through the process. We wanted to develop a facility with a focus on self-sufficiency in both operational and developmental cost recovery. Bottom line, we wanted the airport to continue to operate as a business, to pay for itself, make sure that it did not become a financial drain in the future. And finally, just to ensure that the future development is environmentally compatible with the neighboring area, particularly the community surrounding it. So again, those were our basic objectives that everything really revolved around as we look through alternatives, and certainly the final recommended development alternative. Now this is a little hard to see, I'm sure, in the audience, but what this is reflective of what the future forecast levels for the airport were projected at. The base year when we started was 2004. That was the latest full calendar year of operational and based aircraft data that we had. There's a couple different measures for activity at the airport. One is based aircraft levels. The other is operations or takeoff and landings. And as you can see, when we started the study, there were slightly over 200 based aircraft at the airport. We're projecting by the year 2025 that number will grow to approximately triple that, up to 619 based aircraft. These forecasts, by the way, were reviewed by the committee and then ultimately submitted to the FAA, and the FAA has since reviewed and approved these forecasts for use in all the planning. The other one is the operations count, and what we refer to there is the takeoff and landings, primarily recorded by the tower, but also we took into account nighttime operations when the tower is closed. And there are approximately 105,000 takeoff and landings when the report was started, and we're projecting that number to grow to about 387,000 by year 2025. To give you a frame of reference, the Phoenix Deer Valley Airport operates at about slightly over 400,000 operations annually today. So that kind of gives you a frame of reference. We'll be about that same level in the next 20 years at Goodyear. And I think, Barney, correct me if I'm wrong, but this last year you just reported about 159,000 takeoff and landings for this last year. So you can see the numbers are growing pretty much as we had anticipated, and so we're pleased to see the numbers continue to make those strides. The one pie chart on the bottom is fairly important, and albeit fairly small. And the yellow area is probably the one to focus in on. But we did look at the fleet mix changes at the airport. Right now, the predominant number of based aircraft operating at the airport are about 89% small general aviation, fixed-wing, piston-driven aircraft. We see that number remaining fairly constant. It will decline somewhat to about 85% over the next 20 years. But I think the most important part about that is it does reflect the fact that we still see Goodyear serving a predominant role as a general aviation reliever airport. But the one important note here is we do see a change over the higher performance corporate type of aircraft. We'll see a greater percentage of that over time. They will start to become more predominant at the airport, but still will not be the dominant aircraft. I'm just going to take a little segue here to Karen, if she would like to talk a little bit about something that's very close to you, but just a quick refresher of how the airport ties into the surrounding development.
Thanks, Jim. Mayor, as you're aware, in council, you were presented this proposal at your work session last week. This is the Cross Point development extending from I-10 on the north down to Yuma Road, and then City Center Air Park, and approved PAD south of that to the airport property. The folks at Phoenix Aviation have kept this development and all the developments in the area in mind in working with their master plan, and we have tried to work with them as well. So it's a cooperative effort.
As Karen said, we've been aware of everything that's been happening. It's actually from the day we started, and we're certainly presented with your plans and took those into consideration. I know Brian and folks have been very helpful in that regard. Again, that was a real key point, is just to make sure that we took into account what the City of Goodyear was planning and see how it could integrate quite well with the airport. Now, what we ended up with as of the last meeting certainly was our recommendations, and I'll take you through that very quickly. Again, this is the recommended master plan concept, and there are a number of things about this concept which I'll share with you as we go through this, some of which will be through the PowerPoint and some of which will be through the Elmo. Let me just touch upon the airside recommendations, if I could. There are a couple different things that were real important here as we started to look at the airport. One was from runway safety areas and airfield improvements. And if you recall, we did talk about the fact that the design standards that the FAA has proposed do need to be met. And we spent a lot of time addressing those, and one of which was the runway safety area. And I think if we could go to the Elmo, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but what this is referring to is the runway safety area recommendations. One thing that the airport is short on for the type of aircraft that utilize it today and in the future is the prescribed runway safety area. It's a clear area off the end of the runway end around the runway environment, about 1,000 feet. It's about 300 feet short on the north end. And one of the actually simplest and easiest ways to fix that was to create that full 1,000 feet on the north end by just shifting the runway down to the southwest by 300 feet, or taking off 300 feet on the north end and adding it to the southwest end. There was runway end on both to do that, or runway area available to the south to do that, and still maintain the 8,500 feet of runway, which is the runway length that we wanted to achieve. So this was a very quick way of solving the actual runway safety area problem. We'll go back to the PowerPoint. The other thing was the airfield improvements. I'll just back up here a moment. Some of the things you'll see on that graphic, really, as I talked about, were the runway safety area improvements, but the airfield improvements included a couple real key components. One was in the future providing for a parallel runway. for primarily training operations, but to handle the capacity that we talked about of those operations that are expected. The shorter, smaller runway is about 4,300 feet in length, and that will be adequate to provide the training necessary for those that are providing training at the airport or doing touch-and-go landings, but it'll also serve a wide variety of the general aviation aircraft. The other improvements, well, one thing about that parallel runway, it's a little different than you've seen in plans of the past, is that the parallel runway had always been on the northwest side of the airport in the past. Now it's proposed to be to the southeast. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of efficiencies. This also took full advantage of the airport property that the airport currently controls, or the city currently controls. And the efficiencies, when we talked with air traffic and the flight schools and everyone else, this worked out quite well from an efficiency standpoint. And again, this would be a long-term development program. The other thing are the high-speed taxiways. You'll see a lot of those programmed on there. Again, we were trying to work with air traffic to make sure that they could maintain the operation of the airport as efficiently as possible, and those are some of the airfield improvements that allowed us to do that. From the landside perspective, again, well, let me just touch upon just a couple others. I think I've touched upon all of the major improvements on the air side. The one thing that we did want to point out is that on the air side, on the runways, that the runways will maintain their design standards as they are. Today, the future parallel runway will be designed to a B2 standard, which is an FAA standard. It talks about runway approaches and size of aircraft. So we've made sure it meets all the requirements for the various airport reference code standards that the FAA would require. And again, on the landside recommendations, these are the kind of highlights of those key areas: aircraft storage and parking, vehicular parking and security, and distribution of landside facilities. And again, if we could just switch to the Elmo. We have a few items on here, quite a few actually. These are landside recommendations to the southeast. One of which is there are some hangars that have been built on the south end of the airfield. We wanted to kind of hold on development there because that's where the future parallel runway would go. We want to remove and relocate the airport traffic control tower to the northwest side of the airport to provide an improved facility, number one, but also better visibility of the airfield as a whole. Provide for the development of 472 T-hanger, shade hanger storage positions and 40 box executive hangars. A lot of this came from comments from the users and tenants at the airport of a variety of hangar uses they wanted to see. And of course, we wanted to see some larger 4 airport service hangars. The Aviation-Related Employment Center is where the current aircraft overhaul maintenance facility is right now. Wanted to make sure that had some possibility for expansion. And again, there would be some relocation of T-hangars down near that area as well. And again, providing an airport access road connection to County Route 85, if feasible. Obviously, with that much development on the south side, a secondary access would be helpful, but there are certainly some technical difficulties with the rail line and access through there, which we think could be studied further, maybe be solved, but we think it's good to keep on the books for sure. Also, what was mentioned is land acquisition, and that's a fairly important part of the program. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not talking about land acquisition for future landside development or runway development per se, but there are some areas off the ends of the runway that do require some type of control by the airport, which are known as runway protection zones. And I might just back up a moment to the PowerPoint. It's a little hard to see here, but they're basically these trapezoidal areas off the ends of the runway are designated areas that the FAA suggests that you have control over. A couple different ways to do that. One is fee simple acquisition. The other is by way of easements. So there are a couple different ways. If they're undeveloped properties right now, it'd be good to buy them outright if at all possible. If they currently have development, you might want to look at securing, or the airport would want to secure an easement which would control the height of objects in those areas and also the types of uses so that they're not detrimental either to the pilots and the operations of the airport or to the people in those areas themselves. So we want to make sure it's a compatible type development. We have about 29 acres of property up to the northeast and southwest of the airport, which we thought might be appropriate for fee simple acquisition, and about 39 acres for easements over those RPZ areas. But again, there was no other property recommended for acquisition aside from those. I'll stay on this for just a moment. There's another slide for the Elmo that kind of gives an overview of the hangars, as we mentioned. What we see right now, and I won't take you through all the numbers because there's a variety of different types of hangars to meet the different types of needs of aircraft and airport users, but there are about 206 available hangar positions at the airport today, and we're seeing that the forecasted total needs are about 591 total hangars, but this plan, as we've got, could grow well beyond that, so it does have expansion capabilities and could provide up to 752 hangars well beyond the 20-year time frame. And we'll go back to the PowerPoint. And this I'll guarantee you can't see. This is the Capital Needs Program, and basically what this is doing is looking at the overall needs of the airport and recognizing this is what we'd like to achieve if you could. This is what your needs truly are at the airport to satisfy all the capital development. And this has been broken down into two things. One, a short, intermediate, and long-range program, short being the first 5 years, intermediate 6 to 10 years, and long-term out through 20 years. So you'll see a lot of the cost breakdown and project breakdown on a project-by-project basis, but we've also analyzed the eligibility, whether FAA or state aeronautics would participate in those costs. And we say participate, but not guarantee. Everything is pretty much on a competitive process for federal and state funding. So that's a real important note to make about that. The bottom line is that at Goodyear we're looking at total short-term demands for capital, and this is in actually 2006, 2007 dollars, is about $38 million or $37 million over the next 5 years. The intermediate term is about $32 million, and the long term is $22 million for a total 20-year program of about $92 million. And this is exclusive of the hangars. The hangar costs would also be reflective of additional costs that would be borne either through the aviation department looking at a program or private sector development, a decision of which would probably be made at each time hangars needed to be developed. In recognizing the fact that these needs are pretty substantial and revenues are not always there, historically we looked at the ability to secure federal and state funding, and the next slide you have before you talks about that. And what we did discover in looking historically and talking with FAA and the state is that they could really look at about $1.5 million from the FAA each year and about $1.5 million from the state each year. And that's been true historically for about $3 million total each year. Now, every year will be a little bit different, and I know the aviation department is always pretty aggressive in their requests. But this is a $15 million program reflected before you for the next 5 years, and we've tried to highlight what we felt were some of the most important projects. And I know some of the comments that have been received since this has been released is, of course, prioritizing land, making sure land is looked at first and foremost because of the difficulty in certainly securing property. So this will give you, again, a short-term, realistic look at what you could expect. But again, I think each year you're going to have to prioritize projects, or the aviation department will, and submit those each and every year to the FAA and to ADOT Aeronautics Division for consideration. So there are quite a few projects out there and quite a bit of demand for development, and certainly the aspect of that is very important. Some aspects of the master plan which the committee has seen is certainly the revenue sources that the airport generates, and certainly the expenses that they incur every year. I know Barney can talk to that if need be. But this is where we're at right now. Again, we just presented this program last week to the Planning and Development Subcommittee of the Aviation Department, and it was recommended by the subcommittee to forward it on to the Aviation Advisory Board for their April 19th meeting. And, of course, we're here this evening to answer any questions you might have. And I believe, tentatively, this is also scheduled for consideration by the City of Goodyear Council on May 14th as well. Ultimately, we hope to have this before the Phoenix City Council for final approval by June of this year. There are two things just to make note of that the FAA approves, one of which is the forecast, which I mentioned they've already done. The next one would be the final airport layout plan, which would come after City Council blesses the entire program, and that's submitted to the FAA. So with that, I know I've taken up quite a bit of time giving you an overview, but I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from the public? Okay, again, this is a work session. Why don't we start over with Councilmember Lord? Any comments?
I don't have any comments. But
Okay.
I guess my only comment is I'm glad to see it finally finished, and some progress will be made on it, and that pleases me, because I do think we will have an increase in the air traffic, especially with all these events going on at the stadiums in Glendale. So I'm glad to see you taking action. Thank you for all your work.
Councilmember Antonio?
I'm going to pass from that. Go ahead. I'm thinking through something.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate your report. My concern, and certainly my question would go to Barney, we're getting, as you know, because we fed back to you about the complaints we've been receiving by overflights between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, particularly in the southwestern part of the city. With the projections of flights increases over the years, we're going to be faced with more of this. Is there any way that we can control noise during the early morning hours or takeoffs in the early morning hours so that we don't have our residents complaining to us and consequently us complaining to you?
Outright ceasing the flying at that time is not a realistic possibility. What we are doing, because a lot of that you're seeing right now is the flight schools, is working with the schools to do some voluntary reductions during, started with the evening hours where we've reached our first complaints, and they voluntarily accepted to try to cease flying after 11 p.m. The schools are also trying to reduce the morning flights, but one thing that hinders them is if we have inclement weather, that sends that back out, so sometimes they have to cheat into that. Beyond the schools, it's a bit more difficult to control. The private pilot that flies in and out there, we can print recommendations, but we still are at their mercy that they follow those recommendations.
Well, it appears that the person who's complaining about this is persistent at specific time areas. I mean, this constant during the period of 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning, and that's his area of complaint. So there must be somebody or some school that's flying at that particular time.
Without knowing the exact times and dates, I couldn't give an answer, but if he is willing to call my office, I will connect him with our noise abatement office, and we can find out exactly who that is flying at that time and maybe see what can be done about it.
Well, you hadn't had these complaints, and I'm not going to put the blame on the new school that's coming on, okay? But it appears since they've come on board that this is the area that we're starting to get the complaints from. So I don't know whether to blame them or blame the other school, but
Well, without knowing, I'd hate to point fingers at any individual.
yeah, right. Okay. All right. Well, if I get the complaint again, I'll refer it back to you. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Barney. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Osborne?
I have a couple of questions, and one of them may have already been discussed, and this is kind of for staff, actually. It's regarding the easements. Since we are seeing Cross Points and we are seeing the Sun MP area, have we already discussed these easements in this RPZ area? Is that?
I don't, on behalf of us, I don't believe we've discussed that yet. We're still investigating this because of the adjustments we're going to make through this master plan process of the recommendation of shifting the runway 300 feet. We need to get exact figures before we make a sound move on something like this.
Okay. I mean, because some of these projects are already starting to come ahead of us, so.
We have been in discussions with these people as to how the airport's going to impact them. But this specific easements, no, we have not, because like I say, we're still trying to get those exact figures ourselves after we get the adjustments.
Okay.
Jim, you want to add something to that?
Certainly, as Barney mentioned, we've been in contact with some of the property owners. In fact, some were on the committee reviewing the material. So, in fact, we've taken a couple calls from some property owners and passed on information about runway protection zones and what they mean and how FAA interprets them. So there has been a dialogue going back and forth. One thing, too, I just wanted to mention I failed to earlier is the kind of the northwest side of the development of the airport certainly is put together in a fashion that complements the other development to the northwest. So we worked very closely with that, including a single point of access on the northwest side that would be a kind of a primary access point into the airport that would complement the development. It was, I think, illustrated on Karen's presentation as well.
The based aircraft that you discussed, that's a daily average. Is that what that was?
It's a monthly average.
Monthly average?
Yes, and that's very fluid. We get a monthly count that we give to Arizona Department of Transportation, and it's, like I say, fluid. As we have tenants move in and out, and recently we've been including the storage field, which has dropped dramatically. About a year ago, it was 165 aircraft. Last count, we had 18 in there. So it is very fluid.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I have several questions. One, I also share some of the complaints from citizens in the north subdivision where planes fly over coming in on the approach, on the northeast approach. And they are under the impression that there is an area, and I understand what I've been told was that it was not a regulation but a recommended area not to go east of Litchfield Road when they made their turn to come into the airport. And they said that lately there have been more planes doing that, flying lower. And I was in the park one night with the HOA from the Northwest Subdivision the other night, and it was quite loud because there were just plane after plane after plane. And it was very disturbing. And it was a touch and go, obviously, because these were the same planes coming around. So I just wondered if that's that same issue that Councilman Souza.
Actually, that you speak of is a little bit older. We had a written recommendation for aircraft to approach from that end, going down Litchfield and then making an abrupt turn to the approach on that runway. It is, again, a voluntary recommendation, but it is written in pilot standards. I know that this, again, is the flight schools, and what I can do is discuss this with the flight schools to try to tighten this up a little bit in that area also.
Okay, appreciate that.
Okay.
The other thing, Ronnie, on the funding, local funding, who is local funding on your chart here? Is that Goodyear? Is that Phoenix? Who is this?
Are you volunteering money?
You can have that number instead of that.
Certainly, that's
Actually, local would be the city of Phoenix in this case.
okay.
We are now currently working on a program to improve self-sufficiency at the airport. We do meet our operational budget, but the capital budget's a little bit more difficult for us because of the revenue sources have been down for years. One of the things we are working with is to try to get some more businesses in the airport to increase those revenues so we can increase these capital budgets. Even with the federal grants, we have to kick in 10% for a federal grant. So that can be substantial for some of these grants for us even. So we are working to increase that local funding from our standpoint.
And final question I have is regarding the development of the Rio Salado project, if that ever comes about. We were told that we can't have any standing large bodies of water there because of the flying, because of the birds, and that we couldn't have a lake, a town lake type thing there because that's in the runway crash zone, we're going to call it that. So that the approach from that south end, and is that so?
Actually, the last time I talked to Maricopa County Flood Control, where they had shown us that they were going to do a lake down there, was just outside of our 10,000-foot ring. And we had said at that time we would not oppose that. I don't know if that's changed, and without seeing that information, I couldn't answer that any more accurate than that.
Because I was comparing that to the Phoenix International with right over the Tempe Town Lake.
Standing water is always a concern for us because of the draw of birds.
Yeah.
That project, and I'm assuming we're talking about the project near the King Ranch property.
Yes.
The last I saw that, and it's been about 9 months since I've seen that, so I don't know if it's changed. That was going to fall outside of the 10,000 foot, and we were not going to object to that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Jim, you want to add to that?
Also, just if I could just add to that, I know that the Department of Agriculture, a group called Wildlife Services, works very closely with airports, and if you have developments like that, they will work with you to describe or recommend some mitigation measures that will help prevent those types of things from occurring. So certainly those things can be done. I know the City of Phoenix does that type of work on projects near them as well at Sky Harbor.
Thank you very much.
Okay, just a few questions, Barney. How did the committee respond to the issue of the FBO?
Very positively.
Okay. Across the board, it was pretty strong support for that.
Very positively. And we are working to release an RFP, hopefully by the end of this month, to get an FBO in. Our target goal is before Super Bowl. Trying to get a little bit further back than that, but I think that if all of our steps fall into place without any roadblocks that are unforeseen, we should have an FBO working out of the existing terminal before Super Bowl.
Excuse me, I don't know what these
He does a
abbreviations
fixed base.
Excuse me, let me.
Operations.
FBO is a fixed base operator.
Explain what that means.
For civilian term or non-aviation term, it's similar to a gas station, full service station for
Gotcha, okay.
the private public flying in and out of the
Windshield
airport.
and everything.
It's a very necessary business for us to grow with. The proper fixed base operator is going to not only promote their business, they're going to promote the city of Goodyear and the city of the Phoenix Goodyear Airport. So it's a very important business for us.
It is to us too.
And what did they discuss? I don't know if it's called through the fence. Is that what it's through the
Yes.
wall, through the fence? Was that discussed, and how open is the city of Phoenix to that?
It's not, let me back up from the city of Phoenix. The FAA is not supportive through the fence.
Anywhere or here?
Let me say non-supportive. That doesn't mean that it can't happen. Under the right circumstances, we would be willing to listen, but it is not in the best interest of development of the airport or security.
Describe both.
I was going to say, describe through the fence.
Okay, through the fence would be an operation where you might have someone that hangars their aircraft off the airport and would have a taxiway up to the fence, and a gate would open, and they could taxi into the airport and then utilize it for takeoff and departure, and vice versa, come back. There are numerous security issues and financial issues that come into play that makes it non-supportive from the FAA standpoint. It does happen at airports. It can be a detriment to some ways to airports. Scottsdale Airport has a lot of through the fence, and from a financial standpoint, they lose a lot of financial money that could be used to keep that airport going because of these people based off the airport instead of using land on the airport. It also causes security issues because these gates are usually automatic, and that doesn't mean there's anybody there manning it, so if it gets stuck open by a mechanical failure, you have an open airfield, so it's a security hole.
So if you'd had some business that was built adjacent to the airport, and the owner of that business had a private jet, you would want maybe to work some kind of access then. Is that the idea?
That would be their goal.
Okay, thank you.
Some companies have multiple aircraft, so really they do like that. About hangars. The new hangars, are they in the capital program? I couldn't tell.
No, they're not. We're looking at a couple different options to develop those. including financing through Department of Transportation and also from private investors. I think that private investors probably looks the most positive to us.
How about the old hangars?
The old hangars are going to have to be eventually relocated to accommodate the second runway.
So they would be demolished, or?
Most likely.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a structure that's easily relocatable.
No, I should think so. Yeah. Some of them go back to Second World War, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they look, you know.
Just very quickly on the hangars, to answer your question, while under the capital needs program, the hangars were not shown because they are a separate item that is not FA eligible or state eligible for funding. But we will be in the final program representing what those total costs would be for hangars. Right now, over the 20 years, there's about $90 million worth of hangar costs, given the whole variety of different types of hangars.
So 90 million plus the 90 million?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the last thing, right now in Congress is this FAA reauthorization bill, and it really modifies significantly how we're going to fund general aviation, if in fact it passes, to the extent that it's going to be the small airports that are going to bear the brunt, apparently. At least that's my understanding of it. If that is true, if in fact FAA's proposal for the FAA reauthorization comes true, is this $84 million very unlikely?
I'm going to be honest and
that's
say
crucial to us.
Yeah.
Is this plan is getting FAA support is absolutely crucial.
I'm going to be honest with you and say that what I'm hearing from our FAA regional offices is that immediate impact could benefit us. A lot of the funding is going to be based on operations, and we are one of the higher level operation airports as far as general aviation is concerned, and it could mean more funds than we currently receive. How much, I don't know that anybody can predict that at this time. There's still a lot of things to be answered. Carl, would you like to? Okay.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, the other thing that is likely to happen with the reauthorization bill is that Congress is looking very strongly at increasing what are called passenger facility charges. That is a charge that airports can apply to tickets, passengers that travel through commercial service airports.
I can't repeat it. That is what?
That is a charge that airports apply to the airlines, and it's passed on to the airlines to the passengers on the price of a ticket. When that happens, the most likely thing that will occur is that the large airports that are in the system will have their grant assurances or their granting capacity reduced because they're getting increased passenger facility charges, and that will allow for there to be more money in the system for smaller airports, to get a piece of that pie. So they're making some changes in terms of the formula, but I think overall, what that's going to mean at the end of the day to smaller airports is additional funding capacity for those airports. That is the intent.
Municipalities with airports in the League of Cities, and that's all of them, they're really upset with this reauthorization bill because it does transfer some of the costs from the large commercial to the general aviation, particularly in gasoline costs and other things. And the fear is that, as I understand it, and I've been involved in these discussions, is that the small airports, the general aviation airports, very likely will suffer, which conflicts with what you're saying. I like, I certainly hope what you're saying is true. But it's not what I've been getting through my League of City contact. So
that is our understanding at this point. If something changes there, we'll be sure to get back with you to let you know. But that's my understanding at this point, Mayor.
That's good. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Souza?
Thank you. Barney, what impact do you feel that Super Bowl 2008 is going to have on the airport? I mean, from flights in and flights out.
I'm going to give you this in two parts. Second part being that we're going to get another Super Bowl down the road. This first Super Bowl, I think that the impact is going to be comparable to what we see for NASCAR now. which in our last NASCAR event, we had 38 corporate jets show up. I think we'll probably see somewhere around that figure, maybe a little bit higher, and it's going to be unpredictable because of who the participants are going to be. I think, though, when we get the next Super Bowl, we are going to be the prime facility for traffic. The reason being for that is because Glendale Airport is less than 3 miles from the stadium, and there is a flight restriction put over Super Bowls that starts from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon until midnight on the day of the Super Bowl. A lot of the participants that fly in for these games, that restricts them to the point where they cannot get in and out for their schedules. We're close enough to the stadium that we'll be the next option. And I really believe that next Super Bowl, with the events that are going to come to this side of the valley, such as the parties, the ancillary events such as the marathons and things of that nature, there's going to be more traffic over here than we see at this Super Bowl. So I think that Super Bowl is going to be very important for us to have a lot of this stuff in place so we can support that traffic.
So when 2011 comes here, we're going to be ready for it.
If that's the one we get, yes, we better be ready. Not only the airport, but the whole West Valley.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, just on the CIP program for the airport, are there opportunities? I mean, we're in a unique situation in the sense that we've got a larger municipality that owns the airport within the municipal boundaries of our city, but we have a very vested interest in your airport. Are there opportunities for the two of us to? Have we discussed the opportunities to financially play a part in that, such that, you know, we've been putting all kinds of improvement districts together and everything else, but if a corporation comes to us and says, hey, we want to be right outside the gate, we want to be right on the other side of the fence, can we pull them into, but they need improvements airside, if you will. Are there opportunities, or I guess I would say I'd be open to that discussion if it ever came to that. I don't know if you guys are, but
We would be always open to listen to any opportunity that's beneficial to both communities.
because I look at that 5-year CIP and I see a gap between needs and what the CIP is planned. But we've got some pretty exciting stuff, as you all know, obviously happening just northwest of the fence. So if there was that opportunity to wrap that in, it'd be a good discussion. And then, last but not least, with the airport, with the runway moving to the southwest, have we addressed that to the communities?
Southeast.
To the southwest. Right?
You're going to be moving it.
We're moving the runway 300 feet to the south.
Southwest, correct.
Have we addressed that in our planning processes through our
That's right.
King Ranch and that sort of thing? Sorry. I mean, we talked about, we've got a great, very voluntary developer to the southwest of the airport that's going to put aviation, pictures on every single road sign that's down there, apparently, when they do develop. But what effect does that have, that 300 feet? Does it impact that? I don't know if that's one.
I don't know if that's been discussed, but the 300-foot should not affect the King Ranch properties.
Okay.
Okay, one last question. You had military as one of your columns. Is that German Air Force? Or is that something else on that?
Actually, the military does refer to typically how the tower records military aircraft, which is usually U.S. military, but it's those that are being trained by the U.S. military as well. So they do try to record those separately so that we have an accounting of those.
Is it German Air Force or is that not?
Actually, I believe it's a combination of German Air Force and Luke Air Force Base.
Okay.
We are utilized as an alternate source when emergencies happen at Luke.
Yeah.
That brought up a question that I had as I was going over this literature. I was thinking automatically about the Arizona National Guard at the airport, the facility that they're utilizing there. With the overcrowding of Sky Harbor, do you think there might be in the future plans of moving the Air Guard out to Goodyear?
I don't believe so. That facility is fairly new down there, and one of the reasons it did stay there was extremely strong support from the military to keep it in that central location. we would not stand in the way of such a move if it were beneficial to all communities, but I do not see that happening in the immediate future.
Well, that was a concern to me because, with the encroachment and the need for additional space at Sky Harbor, I think that would be a natural move. And the natural move then would be to bring it to Goodyear, and I wouldn't want to see that happen.
One thing just to point out about the National Guard, one of the things they do out of Sky Harbor is they do an awful lot of their training out at Williams Gateway Airport, and they have some established procedures out there for their proficiency training and utilizing the instrument landing system out there where they wouldn't conflict with, say in this case, the military traffic out of Luke. So that plays into it. They're using both facilities.
Okay, thank you.
What do they fly?
KC-135s.
Yeah, it takes a lot of runway.
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
8,500 might work, but not very comfortably. Yeah.
Moving a military base is not a simple move. You're probably looking at 10 to 20 years of planning to make some kind of move like that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming and all your work, to all of you from Phoenix. And
Thank you for having me.
Barney from local, but he gets paid by Phoenix. So we and when we love to have Barney with us. So Carl, thank you very much.
Work sessions.
Oh, work sessions adjourned.